Tom Fogden here for BNT TV with Rose Herceg, the ANZ President of WPP, and Patrick Guerrera, the CEO of RE. So, thank you for joining me today,
Pleasure.
guys.
Pleasure to be here.
We're going to be talking about Create Space, the Ad Council's diversity census, which is being released today. If you could start just with kind of why this is an important topic for you guys in particular.
Representation matters. Good product, good creativity, good ideas come from people who are part of Australia. And as somebody who is part of Diversity Australia, I like to see everybody reflected. And as much as anything else, Tom, it's an economic argument. Ideas are better with a diverse room of people.
I couldn't agree more. I think that diversity of thought is kind of like the fuel in creativity and great ideas and ideas that really matter and cut through. So, but I think it's easy to say, but it requires an ecosystem around them to actually extract and draw that great thinking and work and power out. And so, you know, for me, diversity is critical at all levels of an organisation.
Yeah, and kind of personally as well, kind of how's your kind of career been shaped by the diversity or perhaps lack thereof within advertising?
So I grew up in Western Sydney and there wasn't anybody that I knew that worked in the industry at all. And I went to school in the western suburbs and everybody pretty much stopped in year 10. They got a trade or they got married rather young. So the options for me were to look outside of that, and I found and stumbled upon advertising, which I love. I am somebody who only speaks English at work and I live a very different life outside of the business. And I think for me, it's opened up my eyes to the types of people I want in at WPP, but ultimately giving people an avenue to come into the industry. But if you don't know it and you don't see it, you can't do it. So for me, on a personal level, nobody like me when I started at Ammirati Puris Lintus in the mailroom looked like me, but certainly spoke another language. It was pretty rare back then.
I didn't grow up in the western suburbs. I grew up in a little beach suburb called Clovelly, which was very, very working class back then too. You know, my dad was a taxi driver and my mum was an outworker. My grandmother raised me. My parents came out in 1960. I think, I got into advertising through a fluke. But when I did get into advertising as a very openly gay man, I went through some pretty interesting times and suffered some incredible discrimination and abuse and bullying. And I think that we as leaders have a duty to show representation, guide representation, because I think the more people see people like us in positions of leaderships, it diminishes shame or fear or a sense of inequity.
Yeah, I think when I kind of look at advertising, it seems like there are a lot more initiatives and kind of company-wide action to promote diversity, which in my industry, in journalism, there isn't as much, as far as I can see, and there are too many people who look and kind of sound like me. Do you think kind of advertising is standing itself in good stead at the moment?
I think there's more we can do, Tom. I think you have to make sure that all the parts of the organisation take an active part in this role. It can't just sit with HR or the talent people. That's bad. It's got to be with leaders. It's up to people like me, up to people like Pat to make meaningful change. I think the industry has taken a big step forward. I think the census matters because we have to count who we are. We just need to know. And so I want to say to everybody, fill in the census. It'll take you only 10 minutes. It won't take a long time.
Fill it in.
We need an accurate count of who we are and what we are. And the more the sample size, the bigger the sample size, the more accurate the data.
Yeah, and I think there are some really, really big challenges ahead of us still as an industry. First Nations representation in our agencies is just nowhere near where it should be. I think, people living with disability, there's a huge job to be done there by our industry. So there's still a long way to go. I think, some of the statistics, from the last census, 32% of LGBTQI people in our industry don't feel that they can come out at work. I mean, that's a lot of shame.
It's not good enough, really.
That's just not good enough. I kind of find that figure personally kind of heartbreaking because that means they're kind of carrying trauma and carrying shame. I mean, obviously that's something close to me, but that figure is still kind of horrifying for me.
I think we're all kind of on the same page here about this, and I hope most of the viewers are. As ever, there will be some that think this is not important and is a load of bunk, and it might have
And they're
been.
going to fly to Florida and live there.
Yeah, well, maybe. But how if you're approached or presented with someone who thinks this is kind of, wokeism at play at work, and that this is actually going to lead to the downfall of us all, how do you convince them that they're talking out their arse?
Yeah. Well, two things. We need to know our numbers, which is why we need everybody to fill in the census. I'm going to say it again, please. Pretty please, with the cherry
Fill
on
in the
top.
census.
And Pat will back me up.
Yeah, fill it in.
It's an economic argument. I don't need to come at it from a societal. I could debate that, but as somebody who grew up in a debating team and is a strategist, our economy works better when it has full participation.
I can't say that any better. I really can't. So I'm going to leave that one with Rose. But I will say around the wokeism, firstly, that argument is usually made by people who are privileged, and we as leaders should respect the fact that we are in very privileged positions. So it's one. And two, I think that there is an assumption, a very dark assumption around that whole wokeism piece, that DE&I is being weaponised for self-gain. And I just don't believe that's what really occurs in the day-to-day.
Thank you for joining me today on what's a very, very important topic. So I've
Been a pleasure.
really
Thank
enjoyed
you,
our
Tom.
chat, and I'm going to say it as well. Fill in the census.